Hakol Niyeh Bidvoro. Good morning.
Morning.
Topic is the danger of corrupt Hashkafa. Corruption of Yiddishkeit. That's an exciting topic. I was giving a shiur one time about different levels of interpretation and pardes and shivim panim l'Torah, and according to many sources, the 70 ways of understanding anything in Torah is actually broken down to 600,000 interpretations according to Shorish Neshama. So somebody had the question, I don't understand. If there are so many correct ways of learning and interpreting anything within Torah, why have there been so many intense machlokesin throughout the centuries amongst Gedolei Yisrael? People fighting what the hashkafa is, doing it like this versus doing it like that. L'maisa, elu ve'elu, divrei Elokim chayim. So many correct ways of doing it. So what's the answer to that question? Meaning there might be hundreds of thousands of ways of doing it right. How many ways are there of doing it wrong? An infinite. Right? So you're allowed to have machlokesin about what's the das Torah, what's the proper approach. And within those discussions, you could have different masoras, but there are definitely many ways that Gedolei Yisrael throughout the generations have looked at and said, this is not representative of real, authentic Torah, and therefore they had to speak out against it. So the truth is we can make this a series. We could talk about all the different corruptions of Hashkafa we've been exposed to throughout the years. But let's start with this. I want to talk today about two very fundamental issues. One is our image of God. How do we perceive the Borei Olam? And then I'd like to get into the idea of Yira. Yes. Well, the truth is, as we walk back from shul, my 2-year-old, when we see the blown up Santa Claus, he always says, Rabbi, Rabbi. Right? See, we live in this sheltered place, never heard of anything else. It's a man with a long white beard, Rabbi. All right. So we have the famous line that is attributed to Rabbi Yitzchak of Berdichev, one of my favorite quotes of all time. If you've been here for many years, you've probably heard me say this many times, but that's okay. The Maisa goes that there was a chassid explaining to the Berdichever Rebbe his concerns and his hesitation with emunah and bitachon, and he had a very hard time believing in the Borei Olam. So Rabbi Yitzchak said back, if I had to believe in the same God you don't believe in, I wouldn't believe in him either. Yesoid Gadol. If I had to believe in the same God you don't believe in, I wouldn't believe in him either. Meaning to say that your childlike, very, fairy tale perception of God is something that I wouldn't believe in. And if that's the only God I was aware of, and you were telling me I had to believe in that, I would also be an apikoros. Right? So our perception of HaKadosh Baruch Hu obviously makes a massive nafkamina in everything that we do. There's a beautiful piece from Rav Kook in the Sefer Oros, and I found a nice, more contemporary translation we can go through together, where he speaks about this concept. Let's start over here in the top left. What do we mean when we say God? God is beyond our grasp. All disagreements between people and all inner conflicts that one suffers in his own mind are only the result of confusion concerning the concept of God. God is an endless ocean that is both the source and destination of all practical and theoretical thoughts. We must constantly purify our thoughts concerning God so that they will be clean from any false beliefs, absurd fears, negative characteristics, or major gaps in comprehension. Belief in God will only bring happiness to a person to the degree that the greatness of God is investigated and understood. When this work is begun, the soul starts to shine from a higher source. Rav Kook is telling us that the picture of a Kodesh Baruch Hu that we have is something that is an ongoing avoda. It's not pshat that we were trained from a young age to believe in the creator of the universe, and therefore we're maminim b'nei maminim, we believe in a barei. That's true, but there's an ongoing avoda within my own mind, my perception of the Borei Olam. That's the Maisa of the 6-year-old girl. She was drawing a picture of God during the assignment. They were supposed to draw something and then explain it to the class. So the teacher goes over to the girl and says, "What are you drawing?" And she said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." She says, "That's very sweet, Shana, but we know that nobody knows what God looks like." And her response was, "They will in a moment." The essence of faith is the belief in the greatness and perfection of the infinite. The belief that anything that enters the heart about such matters is merely a tiny spark compared to what one should have imagined. And that one should have imagined does not even come close to what actually is true. When one speaks of goodness, kindness, justice, power, or beauty, about anything that is life or the enhancement of life, about faith and spirituality, it is all the desire of the soul to express that which is beyond all things. All the names and descriptions, whether in Hebrew or any other language, only express a small and dim spark of the hidden light that the soul yearns for when it proclaims God. Any limit one puts on God brings one to atheism, meaning to say that a limitation I have in my perception of the Borei Olam is kfira. The very concept of describing God is spiritual idol worship. Even the limits of intellect or will or spirituality, even the word Elokim itself, when not understood to be a mere spark of that which is beyond these descriptions, would also bring one to kfira. It's interesting, we speak about the challenge of Avodah Zarah that existed thousands of years ago. And we know that we don't have that same nisoyon bisman hazeh. However, Rav Kook in many places speaks about the ongoing struggle with Avodah Zarah within our Yiddishkeit. Having overly childlike, primitive perceptions of truth is a form of Avodah Zarah. Let's go to the top right here. The greatest impairment of the spirit of humanity is when the idea of God becomes crystallized in a specific way due to habit and childish imagination. This is a form of the sin of creating an idol that we must stay far away from. Due to the general lack of learning about these matters, the concept of God becomes obscure. Since even the clearest understanding of God is blurry, the concept of God that prevails among the masses, and even among the individuals who are supposed to be their leaders, is that of a powerful tyrant, whom no one can escape, and all are forced to worship. When a person comes to serve God with this skewed belief, full of darkness and chaos and lacking any intelligence or Torah understanding, one begins to lose his spiritual light. No greatness of God is then manifest in one's soul. There are only wild imaginations of a false concept of reality that terrify anyone who believes in them. This crushes one's spirit, perverts the emotions, and dulls one's spiritual sensitivity. It uproots the godly spark within one's soul. Such a person may proclaim all day long the belief in God and His oneness, but these are empty words that the soul has nothing to do with. Powerful so far, no? One more piece. This is actually from a different sefer. What we read until now was in the Oros. This is a quote from the Maimare Raya. Honoring God can lead to either empowerment or weakness, and this is a Yesod Godel. Giving honor to God should give birth to an inner courage within man, meaning that although we refer to ourselves as Ovdei Hashem, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu is Melech al Kol Haaretz, a real emunah brings a sense of strength and vitality. It doesn't create this subdued, lack of confidence within the human being. There are many people who, in their fear and anxiety, do not dare to contemplate and investigate the concept of God, and so their image of God becomes a stumbling block. Can you imagine that? You're a teacher in the classroom speaking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it could very well be, if you're not careful, you're in violation of Lifnei Iver Lo Sitein Mechshol. You're placing a stumbling block in front of the students based on the way you're describing the Borei Olam. Serving God is then fulfillment of a selfish demand from a being that desires endless honor. This belief corrupts all sensitive and pure emotions and depresses people, transforming them into base slaves who hate each other. That's an interesting idea. Right? When I have this warped impression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where I'm just here to serve your needs, and it's not empowering, and it's not uplifting, and it's not something that brings ne'imus and the dinus hanefesh. So not only am I corrupted my emunah and bitachon, but all of those around me, very hard to love and respect you when I have that image of God. We'll explore that in a moment. In truth, it is God whom they hate in their hearts, even though they speak words of love and honor towards Him. In their mouths and their lips they honor Him, nonetheless their hearts are far away from Him, quoting the pasuk in Yeshaya. Let's just pause on this. Double click for a moment. Why is it that a person who has a warped or unhealthy view of God would still at least convince himself that, of course, ani mamin b'emunah shalema, but somehow that diminished perception of God causes me to feel disdain not for the Borei Olam, but for all of you? How does that work?
Could it be the same for Hashem and additionally other people as well?
Well, the way that Rav Kook is saying it is that at least I'm giving outward honor. And it sounds like consciously, if you were to ask me, hey, good morning, shalom aleichem, do you hate God? No. I have that little sticker, You should say, I love Hashem. And I say it every day, loud and proud. The idea is, if that's my image of God, I'm a miserable human being. And when I'm a miserable human being and I feel that there's no real hope in my life, that's when it's very hard to have any feelings of love or respect for others. If you go back to ancient times, before the discovery of Avram Avinu, so Avram, if you were to ask anyone, what was his Iker Chiddush? The Iker Chiddush of Avram Avinu was monotheism. And that's true. He shared that belief with the world. What we don't focus on enough, though, is that within that Chiddush, that there's a Borei Olam who's infinite and eternal and doesn't really need our service, and the creation is Olam Chesed Yibaneh. So that means we're created as an expression of love. We're not just servants to this demanding, selfish Adon in Shemayim. And if we believe that every human being is made in the image of that loving and infinite God, so then my relationship with you is very different. So in the primitive, ancient, barbaric world where we believed in paganism and there are just many, many different deities out there demanding different forms of service from us in order for our crops to grow or for it to rain in the proper time, then we're just a bunch of servants. You're worthless and I'm worthless. Part of the chiddush of Avraham Avinu is not just that there's a Borei Olam, but that means that it's a chiddush within the human being. We're not here as worthless creatures just to give you what you need. We're actually placed in Olam Hazeh based on the concept of Olam Chesed Yibadeh. It enables me to have a deeper respect and appreciation of you. The Duvna Maggid has his famous mashal, right? The man gets off the train and he starts walking, and one of the porters yells at him from 100 yards away, "Excuse me, sir, you left your bag." He turns around and he sees this guy schlepping a very heavy bag. "I think this is your bag." And the guy says, "It's not mine." "How do you know? Looks like yours." And says the Duvna Maggid, the man responds back, "I know that's not my bag because my bag isn't that heavy. You wouldn't be schlepping it like that." Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "It looks like you're engaged in Avodas Hashem, but if it's that much of an anxiety provoker and it's giving you that much stress and agmas nefesh, that's not my bag, that's your baggage." Now, Lamaisa, where does our perception of HaKadosh Baruch Hu come from?
I think it's taught.
Taught by whom?
Kindergarten.
Kindergarten, by our parents, right? Basically, anyone older than us who represents Hashkafas HaTorah, right? We look at them not only in their teachings, but our relationship with them has a major impact on our association with the Borei Olam. It's a very natural psychological reality. That's why Lot, when he had a fight with Avram and he decided to leave, he said, "Efshi lo b'Avram v'lo be'Elokov." I want nothing to do anymore with Avram or his God. Where did HaKadosh Baruch Hu come in? Your shepherds and his shepherds had a fight. You want to go in a different direction. Kol hakavod. Why do you have to abandon God? Because Avram Avinu basically was his image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If I'm not happy with my caretaker, I'm not happy with my Rebbe, I feel my father is too critical and not loving, so then almost automatically, that's what I feel about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now we find an amazing machlokus between the Rambam and the Shmona Prakim and the Ramban. This is the massive discussion amongst the Rishonim as to what was the chait of Moshe Rabbeinu. So, if you say over the Rambam superficially, right? According to the Rambam, what did Moshe do wrong? He got angry, right? Rashi learns hitting the rock. The Rambam people quote over as he got angry, and that was the chait, and that's why he lost Eretz Yisrael. But let's take a look at the way the Rambam says it in the Shmona Prakim, and then we'll see the kasha the Ramban has. So the Rambam writes, this is page 2, the pasuk says that you, Moshe, were lacking emunah and you were not mekadei shem shemayim, and therefore you're losing your opportunity to lead Klal Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael. Explains the Rambam. Diktek elov Hashem shiyah odem kamohu koes lifnei adas Yisrael. Hashem was makpid. Person like you getting angry in front of Adas Yisrael, b'makom she'ein roi bo hakas, in a situation where anger was not called for. Ukiyotze b'zeh b'din ha'isha hu chilul Hashem. In your position, getting angry, b'makom she'ein roi bo hakas, that's a chilul Hashem. Why? So says the Rambam, Mipnei shemitenu osav kulam umidevorov hayu lemedim. Because every move you make and everything you say, Klal Yisrael learns from. V'hayu mekavim lahagia behem el hatzlachas olam hazeh v'olam haba. They look to you for their success in this world and the next. So what do they see when you're getting angry? V'chol ma sheyomer o yaseh yivchenu. Anything you say or do, they're going to probe and explore. V'kasher ro shekas amru shehu ein lo pechisus mida. They're going to say, obviously, it's not a flaw in Moshe that he's getting mad. Right? He doesn't have anger management issues. Lule shayadua shashem kasaleinu. It must be that if Moshe is getting angry at us, that means HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mad at us. That we've angered Hashem. V'nachnu lo matzinu l'shem yisborach shekos b'devaro elov b'zeh ha'inyan. And the Rambam says, we don't find Hashem getting angry. So the Chet of Moshe, according to the Rambam and the Shemona Parakim, was not just he got angry. Huh?
We don't find Hashem getting angry here or anywhere.
So it sounds like B'zeh ha'inyan in this context.
The Gemara does discuss that there's more.
Yes, and it doesn't sound like the Rambam is telling us, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu never gets angry in the same way that we do, which happens to be true. It doesn't sound like that's the point here. Here the focus is, B'zeh ha'inyan, in this context, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't angry. So by you getting angry, the mistake of Moshe was not his anger. The mistake was you're misrepresenting the Boreola. Because Klal Yisrael looked to you as basically the sounding board or the representation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That was the Chet of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Ramban comes along and has the question, I don't understand. If you read the Psukim, from the Psukim themselves, it sounds like HaKadosh Baruch Hu was angry and there was a real disappointment. How could you say HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't angry? It's the basic kasha of the Ramban. And therefore, he leaves off B'tzorach Ian on the Rambam. What's the basic answer to defend the Rambam? If we do find in the Psukim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was disappointed and angry with Klal Yisrael, whatever that means, Klape Hashem, so what's Pshat in the Rambam? So the Pshat is that whatever anger was appropriate for this situation, the kas that Moshe was displaying was revealing something that was inappropriate. He was showing a level of anger that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want him to reveal because that didn't represent where Hashem was at, so to speak. So the Chet of Moshe Rabbeinu, lefi the Rambam, was not the anger. It was misrepresenting HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Klal Yisrael. And the Maisa, that's a very scary thing. That means all of us who have any position of influence, anyone who has any interaction with younger children, if they're students, if they're children of yours, if they're nieces, if they're nephews, if they view you as representing Yiddishkeit, that means the way you behave and the way you interact with them is very much creating their image of God. No pressure, right? No pressure. Okay, so this is one area where corrupt Hashkafa can be extremely detrimental. And the way that Rav Kook says it here is that it's the difference between a life of joy, a life of empowerment, and a life of real productivity, in contrast to a life of disdain and depression and feeling trapped within one's service of God, and therefore almost not being able to recognize that and then just having a disdain for others. That's a very different life. The nafkaminas will be infinite. Another area, we'll end with this.
Some places where we call it corrupt Hashkafa is the standard, is the gold standard. So how do you?
So, if the gold standard is to create an environment amongst children or amongst the community where they have this childlike, primitive picture of God, the only thing we would say is chaval. It's mamish a chaval. There are certain things we don't have to say elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. If you're creating that picture of God within the minds and hearts of the next generation, you are doing an incredible disservice to Klal Yisrael. And that's not elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Now, yes, we have to explore. Okay, so we believe in schar and onesh, and we believe in real consequences to action. So how does that all fit in? I'd like to have a separate conversation on what's the hashkafa of onesh. How does that fit into our picture of God as Avinu Av HaRachaman? So that has to be understood. But if the general picture of God is this giant being who's demanding of me and who's looking to get me, that is the greatest disservice we could do for the Jewish people. Period. Yes.
At this point, are we only saying that the way to get this over is just proper midos? And you can say we're not really dealing with any Hashkafa explanation. Like, how do I get over my what Cook expressed first, right? It was more intellectually. Is it not really saying because nobody's really taught these people level. Just when you're younger, just be loving to children, show them loving them.
So it's a good question. How do we give over practically this vast picture of Reb Kook? And I think that's the answer. The answer is, the more we could emulate the Borei Olam in a real way, where they get the sense that everything I'm asking from them as my children or my students, I'm not asking because of my ego or because I need something. I'm doing it because I love you and I care for you.
At a certain point, I need to, right? At a certain age, when it becomes age appropriate, is it necessary to then bring them to Hashkafa and start analyzing what this God is, larger than life?
Yeah, listen, you have to know what's age appropriate.
Even for ourselves, right? If I'm a good person because of my father treated me, I never have a real grasp of what Hashem really is. Or is that enough?
Now, listen, pshat is that we're all influenced by our environment. We're all influenced by our parents and our rebbeim. And those could be reasons why we might have a hard time, theoretically, right? Having this more accurate picture of Hashem. But like any reason, it's not an excuse. Fakir, I understand, if I came from an abusive home, Khalila, so the odds of me growing up with a very healthy, wholesome picture of a Kadosh Baruch Hu loving me and supporting me and me having trust in him, that's going to be hard to come by, right? But Lamaisa, that's what I'm striving for. I wanted to jump into one other area of corrupt hashkafa, and this is regarding Yiras Shemayim. So Yiras Shemayim is something that we know in the Svarim. There are different types of Yira, and this is spoken about at great length. I saw a children's book one time where it was going through the Aleph base, and for every letter of the Aleph base, it had a different midah, and had a picture of a child doing that midah. So for Os Yud, the midah was Yiras Shemayim. So how do you show a child doing Yiras Shemayim? So the picture was a child like this, right? So if you want to throw a kid off the derech, that's the way. That's a very effective way of doing so. The Yiras Shemayim that we talk about in all the Svarim should create a state of mind where you're just a shell of yourself, not really living life, and constantly afraid. Right? That's not the goal of Yiras Shemayim. No, it just shows like a very the picture showed a kid who was miserable. Right? If Yiras Shemayim is making us miserable, that means we're probably doing something wrong. Rav Kook writes, "L'pa'amim mazik hadimyon shel Yiras Shemayim yoser mikol dimyon nifsod sheba'olam." That's a profound, drastic statement. Sometimes a warped understanding of Yiras Shemayim can be more harmful than anything else in the world. Right? You might not fully understand many things, but messing up in the realm of Yiras Shamayim could be the most detrimental thing in your life. Okay? Rav Kook writes elsewhere in my Mari Raya, he says, Kisha ruchnius misgaberes. Now, even though we're quoting from Rav Kook, and one might say, okay, we know that Rav Kook was somewhat unique in his hashkafos, and maybe not everyone agrees to this approach. What we're quoting here, the reason we're going to Rav Kook is because he spends time and he writes about it very eloquently, but these are not radical hashkafos. You find the same theme, perhaps in a different presentation, in classic Balei Musar, Balei Machshava. We shouldn't think this is just one kind of off the beaten path approach. This very much represents, Yiddishkeit. Aruchnius miskaberes oz motzim b'nei adam tam lechayehem. When spirituality increases in a person, how do I know? Because I'm getting more of a flavor of life. That should be the result of healthy ruchnius. Oz hey mavinim umargishim shekedai lichios. And the more ruchnius I have, the more I feel it's kedai to live. Erech achayim oz holech v'ola. And my entire value of life expands. V'al kein mevakshim oz b'nei adam levases yoser es achayim hachumrim. Not only am I feeling more sipuk hanefesh in the realm of spirituality, but I'm tasting life in a deeper and more robust way, even in the olam hagashmi. Shiyu yoser betuchim yoser rechovim v'noyim. I feel that the life around me that I'm living, be'olam hazeh, has been more expanded and it's more pleasant. Az yirbu olam shalom ava v'chedva. Then, when there's real healthy ruchnius, there's more peace, there's more love, and there's more joy. Az yimales choch pinu l'shonenu rina. Now we know that pasuk in Tehillim is referring to the time of Geula, but I think what Rav Kook is doing is saying that will be the ultimate. In the times of Geula, we'll have Oz Yimoles Choch Pinu, but whatever levels of ruchnius we could tap into now, afilu b'hastera, even in Golus, we're connecting to that Oz Yimoles Choch Pinu. It brings joy, it brings vitality, it brings energy. Ki aruchnius hagadola v'hanisgava, hamakefes es kol v'choderes el tocha kol. Real ruchnius that envelops everything. Mamole benachale adeneha games achayim hareilim hachumrim. It makes regular life more pleasant. Umetzarefes umezacheches osam, and it purifies life. Mipnei shelefaneha eina olam hachumri nifrad. The goal is not to have this dichotomy, this inner turmoil of fighting between ruchnius and gashmius. The goal is, Yiras Shamayim brings a sense of life and enjoyment, b'olam hazeh as well. I think before the Yira, before the ruchnius. There's a beautiful sefer, Al Tichtu B'Yelid, right? Spare the child, that is, Baruch Hashem, it's become very popular in the realm of education and being mechanech children and students. He has a small piece where he says, although the sefer is not primarily on Hashkafa, it's more about education, he says, I can't help myself but bring in this point because it has such an impact on how our children grow up with a healthy self-esteem and feelings of overall well-being. He writes as follows. There's this pathetic mentality that is often pervasive in religious circles.
What does that look like?
Let's read for a moment.
Flesh out what he's saying.
Right. So pathetic mentality means that kedusha and ruchnius means that we're not thriving in life. We're not walking around with a smile. There's almost this sense of diminished chiyus, but that goes so well and that fits perfectly within a world of frumkeit and kedusha. That's what he's calling out. This pathetic mentality is a major cause for the growth of what he refers to as this obsession with materialism. How does a pathetic mentality of ruchnius bring to an obsession of materialism? It's pretty simple. If Yiddishkeit means a total disconnect from anything in the world that brings simcha, so then you have magazines where every other page is basically promoting indulgence in Gashmias, because that's what we all crave, because our view of religion is so narrow, is so mitzamsem, and being involved with Ruchnius means that I'm pulling myself away from the Simcha Sachayim that other people are experiencing. It can create an obsession for materialism.
But the finish is that I didn't run away to something else. I'm still from.
I'm still from because, listen, I know this is what I have to do. I have emunah, but I'm totally mistaken in what being from looks like. Right? This is the corruption of the Hashkafa. I'm not running away from Yiddishkeit. I believe in Yiddishkeit. Nebuch, I don't have the picture. My picture of Hashem and Yireh Shemayim has been warped.
Yeah, it's warped. I'm scared to leave because I think it's true that God is really just selfish.
And I wouldn't want to leave. This is my culture. This is what I feel comfortable with. And I believe it's true. But unfortunately, I was never given the tools to fully appreciate what Ruchnius looks like. And therefore, my concept of Ruchnius is a diminished Simcha Sachayim. He writes, we will not discuss the issue on the fundamental level. This is not a Hashkafa Sefer. We also will not detail the full extent of the harm that this mentality causes. That only makes you more curious, right? But we cannot simply ignore this warped, counterfeit form of Yiddishkeit. Warped, counterfeit form of Yiddishkeit. Not only because it is entirely at odds with true Judaism, but also because it wreaked havoc on our chinuch. So then he goes on to quote from different contemporary Gedolei Yisrael who speak about the issue. We have one quote here where he brings the idea of authentic Yireh Shemayim brings a sense of chiyus. And that's something that most people don't put together in the same sandbox, right? Yireh Shemayim and chiyus. When you think of Yireh Shemayim, you think of that child on Os Yud. That's not showing chiyus. So what we've learned this morning.
What would you be a picture of Yireh Shemayim for you?
Yireh Shemayim should be mamish, a child who's molei simcha. Molei simcha. Now, obviously, it's not molei simcha because I'm seeing LeBron James. That's probably not, classic Yireh Shemayim. But molei simcha, lav dafka within something that's directly ruchnius, but molei simcha with life, rejoicing with friends, having a good time with siblings, holding his father's hand, and feeling the embrace of those who love me, and feeling the embrace of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But definitely not the picture of the kid doing this. That's the Yireh Shemayim that destroys and corrupts. It's a counterfeit form of Yiddishkeit. Okay, so what we've done today is we've explained that there are definitely many, many right ways of doing things, and there could be shivim panim l'Torah, but there's an infinite number of ways of corrupting the true Hashkafas HaTorah. Two things that we focused on. Number one is the image of God, how important that is for ourselves, and how we behave in order to try to convey that image of God to our children. That could spell the difference between a life of real accomplishment and joy and connection with those around him and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, versus a life of just depression and the lack of empowerment. And then we spoke a little bit about Yiras Shamayim. What we haven't done, though, is we haven't described the other side of the coin, which is, okay, so how do you engender a healthy Yiras Shamayim? What does that look like? We know what it doesn't look like. We know that the way to hopefully create the image of a God in the child's mind is very much through our relationship and through me projecting that as best as I can. But what does a healthy Yiras Shamayim look like? And how does all of this fit with the schar va'onesh, the accountability concept? We do believe in Gan Eden and Gehenim. So how does this picture of life fit with a healthy understanding of schar va'onesh? We'll explore that next time. Shkoyach.